Got to let Spirit kind of do its thing on us. When we listen to a song, like we just did, or we read a book, well, even listening to a talk, like you're going to today, maybe you read a book or you take a class on a principle or on a technique for bringing us back to who we are as spiritual beings, it can seem to have a lot of impact on us in the moment. But then something happens. We get triggered in some way, and all that seems to go out of our mind. We don't recognize that we're in the very situation that the principle would help us with, or that the technique, the practice that we've been studying would also lift us out of. I am the perfect example, it turns out, of someone that can totally forget. I retired just a little under 2 years ago. And at the time, just to give you a little background, at the time of my retirement, and we were talking a little bit about this at the potluck last night, that I think the lifting of all that responsibility, when I left the church, there would be between 300 and 400 adults. And it's a lot of holding of people. So I wasn't really getting to experience the fruits of my spiritual work. But I've done a lot of spiritual work. And suddenly, with that off my plate, I was experiencing a sense of very little mind activity, almost as if I had no mind, which might seem a little scary to you, but like especially if you're facing Alzheimer's or something. But when it happens spiritually, what's left is a sense of peace, a sense of quiet, a sense of love. It's incredibly enjoyable and satisfying. Now, at the same time, Stuart and I, we've moved into this new house maybe a year before, and we've employed a contractor to expand our parking. So in the mountains, parking is a big premium. And especially when you live on a one-lane road on the side of a cliff, sort of, you know, with a lake down below and your house is down below. And so we hired a guy to come in that's an excavator, and he is to pull the mountain away and build us a rock wall and create about 6 parking places. At the time that I retired, this project had been going on for 9 months. When we employed him, he said it would be done in 2 weeks. This is the way it goes in the mountains. Maybe also in Grand Junction. Yeah. I don't know. Yes, there's lots of eye rolling going on. Yes, these days, right? So in contrast to this open, spacious feeling, when I would walk up, oh, and by the way, over the months, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but over the next few months, he kind of ghosted us. You know, he would say he was going to come by, but he would never come by. Or if he came by, what would it be? Maybe we would get 4 hours out of him. Yeah. So we never really saw anything change. And if you can imagine, there's big piles of dirt. There's a hillside that kind of looks like it's going to pour down on you. There's big piles of dirt and rock. And so, you know, I'd be in this, you know, nice, relaxed state. And then I'd walk up to the road. And I'd be like, you know, you're tense. You feel powerless. You're angry. He was the devil incarnate to me. And here's what's fascinating. It never occurred to me to look at it spiritually. Right? I mean, never. I've been a minister at that point for 27 years. Never occurred to me. But thank God the universe is always unfolding for us, right? So someone had handed me a book for my retirement called The Disappearance of the Universe. I meant to bring it today as a prop, and I forgot. Have any of you read it? It's by Gary Renard. Okay, so if you're into the Course in Miracles at all, and I at this point had done the course twice, it's a year-long study, and I never was sure I fully understood it. It's not the easiest, but this book explains it. I wish I had read this book and then done it, because I think it would have been really powerful for me. But here's the point I want to make today about what the book said. The book is a channeled book. It's from two ascended beings who also lived during the time of Jesus. They talk about parts of the Bible that, yep, Jesus really said that, and the writers, did a little bit of, they were a little liberal in what they said there, But they said, if you take what Jesus said and just boil it down, all Jesus ever talked about was forgiveness. That's all. And why? Why is forgiveness such a powerful tool that someone that we have come to trust spiritually for almost 2,000 years, why would he only talk about forgiveness? The answer, and I thought they did a beautiful job of saying it, is when you get to know, in Unity we often talk about the mind, but today we talk more about the ego. Because we are spiritual beings, and that can't be taken away from us. And in order to survive in the world, we also have an ego. And the ego is a pattern way of living that is driven by our beliefs. And our beliefs are not so much today's beliefs, but our early childhood conditioning. And we just leave those patterns over and over again unless we interrupt them. So for example, with this contractor, my ego just chews on him, like, that son of a bitch. I am suffering, and it's all because of him. I couldn't be suffering because of me. No, I'm suffering because of him, right? Forgiveness gives us an opportunity to break that pattern. It gives us an opportunity to remember that, like us, at his core, he is a perfect child of God. Everyone at their core is a perfect child of God. Now, everybody has an ego. Egos can be difficult. Ask Stuart. Mine can be very difficult. Mine can be very difficult. And as I began to just work with the forgiveness, I also began to realize not only am I suffering over his ego, and by the way, it's not just me, right? Like, Stuart's been suffering. We have two neighbors that when this guy showed up to do some work, immediately grabbed him to do other work for them. Like in the mountains, it's hard to get anybody to do anything. And they would agree with you. Like, they've sworn they're never going to hire him again. Now, their jobs are done. Ours at this point is not. So I'm suffering, and I realized, he may not be aware of it, but he's suffering too. Life isn't going the way that you really want life to go. So that was incredibly helpful and very humbling. How on earth did how many times over 27 years do you think I would have taught forgiveness and probably spoke about it thousands of times, right? So why is that? So that same summer, I signed up for a spiritual retreat. It was more like a teaching retreat. I think some people think spiritual retreat, oh yes, we're just going to go and we're going to say Om for the whole day and sit cross-legged. Now this is one where you do some meditation, but you also listen to a talk, and then you do an exercise for the talk, and then you get to ask questions, and they give you, answers and discussion. And so in about the third day of this retreat, the whole day was on attachment. Now, do you have any, maybe even the word sort of speaks, but some of you probably know something about attachment, right? Attachment is something that happens to all of us. It comes because when we are born, we are very dependent. And so everything comes from the outside. And so at an unconscious level, we think that all of life comes from the outside, that we're going to get our nourishment, our love. As we get older, friendship, a sense of comfort and safety, it all comes from the outside. And we become attached to certain things, especially to those things that we think are going to finally give us what we've always wanted. And I'll just also say that much of that attachment is unconscious, right? So they're going through it and they're listing all these things, and I'm like starting to feel really good about myself because, oh yeah, I used to be attached to that, but I'm no longer attached. You know, you get a certain sense of pride. Of course, that's ego too, but, and then on the, you know how in the question and answers, you know how sometimes the presenter can be reminded of something by a question and they go, oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I forgot to say that the number one attachment is having things go the way you want them to go. Shit. I thought I was so evolved. First it's the forgiveness, and now I realize I have just wanted this project to go the way I want. So do you notice when you're attached, again, it brings suffering. Because if it doesn't go, if you don't get what you want, oh, by the way, I probably should be looking at my notes. Let me just give, because I found these examples of attachment that I thought, just to give you, because you know, we're talking about not getting what you want, but it's a grasping, it's wanting to hold, wanting to hoard, wanting to buy, wanting to own. If you're attached to something, you don't have it. We exert lots of energy trying to get it. You know, we need it. If you've got it, you want to hold on to it. That's the kind of the hoarding. Remember, with spirit in life, when you really transcend an outer life, you learn to flow with life. You don't suffer so much. There must be something in this for me. You know, it's sort of, not with attachment. No, we want to control it, and we suffer when it's not going our way. It also brings up tremendous judgment. Oh my God, hit me right between the, I was in such judgment of this guy. You know, I used to say, boy, if I live my life like that, oh. And let's, you know, sometimes we think that these ideas are new ideas, right? Like attachment, it's a new psychological idea. But let me just read you something, I hope. I want to read you a passage from the Bible. It's actually from the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 19. And while it's talking about things, I want you to hear the advice about attachment. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven. Treasures in heaven are inner treasures. Create space in your treasure chest for spirit, where neither moth nor rust consumes and where thieves do not break in and steal, for where your treasure is where your heart is also. So an interesting thing happened for me. Oh, by the way, so with, you know, so often the ego says, okay, well, he just says that's bad. Okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Yeah, that doesn't work. No. So the interesting thing with attachments is just to get to know them. You know, not to let your judge get on you for all the things you're attached to, because we're all attached to a lot of things. In fact, and I'm going to assign this to you guys, but in that retreat, they had us pull out our notebook and said, we just want you to take 5 minutes to write down anything you can think you're attached to. Holy cow. I mean, really, it went on for pages for me. Just 5 minutes, just writing things down. So when we're willing to just bring them to mind and begin to explore them a little bit, anything to do with the ego just wants to be seen. It's so interesting. It just wants to be acknowledged and seen. And so they will begin to soften their hold on you. They can even begin to dissolve. So as I'm sitting there going, okay, I am a major wanting it to go my way, and this parking project is not, then I could walk up there and go, isn't it interesting what the universe will create as a lesson for us? I mean, it is major. And as it created space between both forgiveness and seeing my attachment. By the way, why would we want to work with those attachments? Because you see, those are often what underlie our suffering. And so, have you ever noticed when you're not attached to something? Like, let's say you're not attached to a bowl in your house, and it breaks. Oh, well, you sweep it up, you throw it away, 5 minutes later, you can't remember they had the bowl. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it kind of comes off your shoulders, or what do they say? Slides off your back or something, slips off your back. Not when you're attached. You're down there crying, trying to put the thing back together, you know. So when we can let go of attachments, we're more open to what life is offering us, right? Are we doing okay? Can I tell you one more story? So in that vein, that life is, so it's sometimes hard for us to remember that God loves you so much. There's nothing but love for you. And is always unfolding a life to pull you more into the awareness of how wonderful you are. Your capacities, your capacity to love. So in the book, which I'm forgetting Renard's book, The Disappearance of the Universe, right? Disappearance of the Universe. He tells a story that I found incredibly powerful and touching about a young woman who was a professor. So she couldn't have been too young, right? Because it takes a while to become tenured as a professor, who loves her job and finds it very satisfying. And she has, one year, a male student who is not performing. He's not turning in his assignments. If he does, they're shoddily done. And she calls him into her office a couple of times during the semester and says, listen, I'm going to have to fail you if you don't pull it together. But he doesn't. And she does fail him. And he comes into her office once he gets his grades, during office hours, and says, if you don't pass me, I'm going to claim that you made sexual advances at me, and that if I didn't accept them, you were going to fail me. And thinking that he would go to the school's administration with that, she kind of warned the administration. She said to him, go ahead. This was a woman of integrity, right? Well, go ahead, do what you got to do. But she went to administration. He went to the media. And the media never contacted her, never followed up with what is the truth here. She had all the evidence to show she had learned and been coached by the university. If you're going to fail somebody, keep copies of their work, take pictures. If they do physical work, take pictures of their physical work, have your evidence ready. She had all that. Oh, by the way, once the story came out with the media, then 2 other men that she had failed came forward and made the same accusation. And so even though the university acknowledged that that this had really, that this was not true, they let her go because they said, it's destroyed your credibility as a professor here. No one's going to sign up for your classes. They let her go. And then what she found out quickly was that she couldn't get a job anywhere else in a university because the word was out, right? Even though it was not true. Are you feeling it?
Yeah, it's terrible.
I thought our contractor was Satan incarnate. I found 3 more just reading this story, right? Yeah. But she had an orientation with forgiveness and began to practice forgiveness right away. Unlike me, who kind of went totally out of my mind, she realized that this was going to eat her up if she didn't practice forgiveness. And she talks about, well, they're relaying her story, but in the story, she relays that it was absolutely amazing to her how many times her frustration or hatred of these 3 men could come up. But she would because remember, that's the pattern that needs to be broken. And she would go to forgiveness, remembering that they were children of God, that they had egos, they were suffering also. But for her, the space brought some kind of will up for her. See, Spirit is ready to manifest in whatever way you need for the situation. Ego's always trying to approximate that, but often it's clunky. It can be kind of asshole-ish at times, but not with Spirit. Spirit can be direct without being mean, can be loving but firm. Spirit is amazing in that ability, but it needs space. It needs a place in our consciousness to manifest as us. And so for her, it was this will that came off as a tenacity. She just kept working at it. There's got to be a job out there. And then the creativity manifested. She stopped applying for university jobs. She just started applying for jobs where I might be good at this. I might be able to do that. And she landed a job. Not only did she land a job, but it turned out to be incredibly satisfying. And the piece that really caught my attention is she said, I brought certainly the gifts and the skills that I had developed as a professor, but this job broadened me so much bigger that if I had not been jettisoned out of that job, I'd still be a professor, and I would not know the capacity that I had as a human being. And you see, in Unity we call that divine order, that there is always a divine order playing out in our lives. But can you imagine how hard it is for us to really get it if we're attached, if we're not forgiving, if we're not creating space for Spirit? Then we're still trying to control it, and you're walking around all tense and life, I'm the victim here. You're never the victim. Never. So with the contractor, something interesting happened. I started to interact with him from a different place. I wasn't feeling powerless. I had a lot of compassion. I had some curiosity. Was I still frustrated? Oh, yeah. Did I still have to stay on him? Yeah. He needs constant, And he came back. He actually finished the project for us, kind of maybe after the first snow. I mean, it was pretty frozen, but he got it done. But there's just a little follow-up to the story, probably bigger than I really want to admit. But we had a huge snowfall last winter in Grand Lake, where we live. And in the spring, the water was literally pouring through those rocks that he built the wall, and part of the wall collapsed. I was impressed. And by the way, it was late in the season. He didn't think that he could find anybody that would drive a dump truck down our little single road. It's very up and down, and it was icy already. So we still have the big piles of dirt and rock. We have a finished wall, it's partially collapsed now. And he says to me, he corners me and says, I see the part of the wall collapsed. I'll get in and get that fixed. Great, right? So would you say he remembered that we wanted to do our boathouse over, or did you? Okay, he remembered, yeah. So this guy's ego is amazing to me. We have now been almost 2 years waiting for the parking, and he contacts us and says, I want to do your boathouse over. I know, it was like, some people are amazing. So we invite him over, and we also were looking at trying to find other contractors. So he did his shtick, and he was willing to do, we don't really know, right? We kind of had an idea what the boathouse needed. It needed something, let me tell you, but we didn't know for sure. So we went through in the shtick, and he goes, oh yeah, and he brings this guy that kind of looks like your grandfather, right? I mean, we're all getting older, but I mean, this guy was, he'll be the main worker, and I'm going, okay. So then we get another contractor in, and both Stuart and I really liked him. And he said to us, you don't need to do that. You guys could power wash this. If you want to save a lot of money, power wash this sand. And I mean, he had ideas on how to work with a retired minister. I'm not, the CEO of Chevron. I'm a retired minister, right? And I don't want to spend $100,000 on this boathouse. I want to see what we can do. So he said, we were both impressed. And then he got us a quote the next day. And we said, great, let's go with him. So I let the contractor know, we've decided to go with someone else, but we're really excited to get you to finish up the parking. Well, nothing happened. All summer long. And he had said to us in the spring, or said to me, I am struggling with an equipment problem, but when I get it fixed, I'll get it done. It's funny, I am not the brightest thing, evidently. It took me all summer before I realized, oh, he's angry that we're not letting him do the boathouse. He's not coming back. And it was so interesting that it was just like the light went on. I wasn't angry. I actually wasn't even frustrated. I think at some level I was almost relieved. Oh, we're done. And I called friends and I found another guy. Now, yeah, Stuart's laughing. He said, okay, I can start in a couple of weeks. It still hasn't happened. And I called him later on, just before the first snowfall. I said, well, can we do it next spring? Oh, I can get a piece of equipment out there Tuesday. We'll get this thing wrapped up, And I'm like, wow. I even called Stuart. Stuart goes, I'm not holding my breath. I'm all excited. And Stuart's like the realistic one. But isn't it funny? It was like, yeah, you're done with us, and frankly, we're done with you. Not that, like I saw him the other day, I waved at him, It's not like I'm divorcing him out of our lives, but yeah, it's okay. And I was so pleased to see that I didn't suffer through it, that it was just like, here's information, and now I know how to proceed. So, out of this love for you, life is always unfolding the perfect life for you. God is unfolding that life. And we want to make space in our consciousness for that to happen. Because often when God is unfolding a life for you, there are parts of it you're not going to like, because it's bumping up against limitation in you. And so the opportunity that Jesus is modeling for us is to forgive, and to forgive, and forgive, and forgive. And out of our willingness to forgive, we create a space for Spirit to come in with strength and power and creativity and compassion, love for you, love for the other. When we're also willing to look at our attachments, we're getting to that attachments are not logical, they're emotional. They're like knee-jerk reactions. They are beyond the mind. They just happen. But when we're willing to explore them, we have more of a chance to remember Spirit in the moment instead of being caught into the pattern of our ego. And in that, through that amazing process of life, to, like that professor, experience the full potential of what we are as spiritual beings. Namaste.